Thank you so much for joining us. Want to welcome you to Creative Explored, and thank you for joining us online. I know it's there's a lot of opportunities to go out and see people in person, but I think the benefit of doing virtual programs like this is it allows us to expand our community, and we're so excited tonight to be having Nicole and Christine join us in relation to Peter Cordova's solo exhibition, which is currently on view in our exhibition space at Creative Explored. Let me just move to the next one here. Yeah, so welcome to Coming Home from the Philippines to San Francisco. And again, we would love to have this in person, and we do encourage you to come by and see our exhibition that is currently on view at Creativity Explored, titled "To the Place Where I Grew Up" by featuring Peter Cordova's work. And actually, we have two of the curators of that exhibition here. I see in the chat here, Paul and Gilles. So welcome. I'm glad you two could join us as well. So Peter's show is I'm going to turn over to Sophia, who's going to chat about the exhibition, but it really gave us, this exhibition gave us the opportunity to reach out to some of our community partners, in particularly Balay Kreative and artist Cristine Blanco. So we're so excited to have you join us and talking about kind of this place we call home in San Francisco, and where especially where you've come from, and how your artwork influences your culture and vice versa. So welcome, and we're thrilled to have you here. A little bit about Creative Explored, for those of you who don't know, we've been around for almost 40 years. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary next year. We are an art gallery and art studio, I should say, where we have an active program where we support disabled artists to create work. We exhibit their work in our own studio and gallery, as well as far and wide. And we, especially these last 2 years, we've been focusing on a lot of virtual programming, which is a whole new pivot for us, serving artists from afar via platforms just like this. We practice art of all media, including drawing, painting, textiles, ceramics, which you'll see some of those this evening. So we welcome you to join us and come visit our gallery and studio. Our gallery is open to the public on Fridays and Saturdays by appointment, and I'll put that in the chat later on once we get going. But welcome to all of you. And before I hand this over, because we have a lot to cover and a lot of great information to share with you, I just wanted to do a quick plug for our upcoming Art Changes Lives. It's our annual fundraising gala. It's on April 1st at the Metreon, and we will have tickets. Tickets are now available as well. And I mentioned that because it's our annual fundraising gala, where it really allows us to fund our programming, and it's we're actually live and in person, and it's a hybrid event this year. So we'll be doing it live at the Metreon as well as virtually. There'll be a silent auction, of which one of Peter Cordova's kind of a more rare piece, this black and white drawing of his, will be featured in the silent auction, the online silent auction, I should say. So thank you all, and I'm going to hand this over to Sophia Yao Weeks, which is our AmeriCorps Art and Business Development employee for the year. We're thrilled to have her. So go ahead, Sophia, and I'll just be in the background doing these slides.
Thanks so much, Anne. So as Anne said, tonight's discussion takes place in the context of our current exhibition, To the Place Where I Grew Up by Peter Cordova. This evening, we want to uplift and hear from voices of the Filipino arts community in the Bay Area specifically. As you can see here, from our 5 practicing Filipino artists at CE with styles quite distinct from one another, there is such diversity in art across an identity, which shows that it is not a monolith. Today, we see how 3 Filipino-American individuals in the Bay Area, Peter Cordova, Nicole Salaver, and Cristine Blanco, explore ideas of home, belonging, and identity in varying ways. To kick off our 2022 gallery schedule, Creativity Explored staff decided to highlight Peter Cordova. Like the title of the exhibit, To the Place Where I Grew Up, Cordova explores his native Philippines and his long-term interest in Indigenous American culture. The dates of Peter's exhibition have been extended to March 26th, and you can see his works in person at our gallery. We encourage all of you to, after this program, schedule an appointment on our website so that you can visit. Born in 1966 in the Philippines and a CE artist since 1996, Peter Cordova references memories of his birthplace in the Philippines and his interest in Indigenous cultures in his practice. His detailed depictions of cultural activities and stylized figures are illuminated by his application of rich and earthy palettes. Peter Cordova is an extremely social individual and particularly goes around the studio, interacts with artists and staff alike, and preferred partaking tonight in today's program with a pre-recorded Q&A. So let's hear what he has to say.
I watch Channel 9 National Geographic and Nature, and I see a lot of things that they show on the television. So I decided to get some idea of how they look like and how do you make them a real person. So I like Channel 9. Because we got no program like this one in my homeland. There's no program like this one. And we decided to come to the state and you can find something like this one in the Bay Area. It's about our culture, and that's what we are all about, and our heritage and tradition. I'm very pleased. This only one chance. This only I could ask for. And I'm very thankful for it and very thankful for this staff and all the preparation that they done for me. And I really appreciate it. And I'd like to thank them also for the exhibition that they give me a chance for the first time.
So that was a bit from Peter Cordova. Now we are going to look at the walkthrough with curators Paul Moshammer and Gilles Combet.
I'm Paul Moshammer, and I'm studio director of Special Explorer.
And I'm Gilles Combet, and I'm a teacher, and I've been working here for 23 years. So we both know Peter for a long time.
Yeah, I started actually 10 years before, so 32 years ago. And I remember when Peter started here, and Peter, when he first came in, he made, maybe more similar to those, he made like faces, one face on each sheet. And I think he did that for like a year, and from one day to the next, and maybe it's my memory, but all of a sudden he started doing volcanoes, birds like eagles, people that definitely look like Native American, indigenous people, and animals, and all these decorations. And it came out of, I was like, where is this coming from? And he always said National Geographic.
And so we heard him talking about his brother, telling him one day, showing him a National Geographic magazine, and he took it from there. And then he's been doing the same thing for like 30 years, and we feel like it's a place where he feels some level of comfort So recreating something that is very personal, creating his own myth, and revisiting it all the time, adding elements, making it more complex. It's almost like a repetition of the work over and over and over again. And our job when we saw that was to show the whole thing. Until then, his work was always seen as a single panel. We saw them continuously as single panels, but we never got a chance to see the whole thing. And so what happened during the pandemic is he was working on his own, and we provided him with colors and paper. And basically he went through like, and he would cut his own paper, which is a really interesting element because it's never square. And so there's sort of an organic quality to it that was revealed during that time. And the way he used colors, he just kept using the same colors until he was, until he finished the pencil, whatever, and moved on to the new set of colors. So there's a natural thing that happens, natural flow that happens. When the colors are exhausted, then eventually moves on to another color. So there was a sense of continuity in that work. And again, when you see the whole thing together, you realize it's a whole world. It's like a world where he basically lives in every day, going back to that world every day. And we know his story about immigration, the trauma, the difficulties, the desire to be here, a breadwinner. One of the things he told us early on is, as soon as he came here, he wanted to be part of the family life and make money. So he started working at Safeway, and he started doing art.
And he started working at Safeway exactly at the same time as when he started coming here, so in '96. And so he has really a strong work ethic. He would come here in the morning from 8:30 on till about 1 in the old days. And then Monday, he was always here the whole day till 3. But the other days, he would leave at 1 and then start working at Safeway in the afternoon, evening. So working Tuesday through Saturday at Safeway and Monday, Friday to Friday here. So he was always like, and
super independent.
Yeah, and it was really like what you just said. It was really important for him that he's also like bringing money home, contributing to this family, to his community, and there's really a very strong sense of family and community for him. They live in this house together, like his whole family. I mean, several, siblings, her husband, children, his mother, who's, the matriarch, and she's always been there, and she still cooks some of the most amazing meals, and so I just get this sense they're also very religious. I mean, they go to church together. And he's always trying to help and be helpful.
Yeah, he's got a great sense of duty. And actually, the way he is with us, for the whole process of the show, there was a lot of, oh, thanks, guys, it's amazing. This is great. He's really enjoying the process of recognition. And really, I mean, in a beautiful way. So
yeah, it's really amazing how he married his own culture, Native American, and making up his own story, his own mythology. So what you were saying earlier about the colors is interesting because it really was like this. Here, this whole panel has the most colors, and then you move to the next one, and it's like, whoa, this is fewer colors, and some more brownish gray tones, none of the bright yellow, orange, reds. And I think it really had to do with the colors. He uses this Prismacolor markers, and that he didn't have certain colors anymore. And you can see it in the next two panels how the colors, there's less color. This is the bright and most colorful panel.
That being said, all his work, right? Which is like, even if it's bright, which is difficult to manipulate bright colors, and they always work. There's an integrity in the piece. And then obviously over there, it's a so earth color. So he's got this totally natural way to do things, natural talent, totally on his own. I mean, in this organization, sometimes we have people that we help a lot more. We help them with the colors, we help them, using the media. But in this case, he doesn't need any help. And C is more like a community for him. He can just come here, sit at the table with his work. Nobody basically has anything to say. That's something that we really enjoy. Somebody like that he needs a community to work, and then he does this amazing environment.
Thanks so much, Paul and Gilles, who are in the audience today. And if you enjoyed that, a full video with an added walkthrough with Peter Cordova will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the near future. While we were unable to host a celebration open to the public, Peter was able to celebrate with his family and CE staff, as you saw in the last slide. Today, building off of Peter's Soul exhibition, we will be talking to Nicole Salaver, Program Manager from Balay Kreative, and Bay Area artist and educator Cristine Blanco. Thank you both so much for joining us, and to our audience, we have a lot to cover in a short period of time, and we hope to save time for a Q&A at the end, so feel free to put any questions you might have within the chat. So today, Nicole will be opening up our discussion with a focus on Balay Kreative. Nicole is a San Francisco native with a long family heritage of activism and community work in the Filipino American arts and culture scene. Her grandfather, Canuto Salaver, was a manong of the International Hotel in the 1940s. He was also an original co-founder of the famed Baton restaurant and pool parlor in SF's Manilatown. Her grandmother, Estrella Salaver, also led the San Francisco-based Philippine American Cultural Foundation, whose specific purpose was to promote social and cultural awareness in the community and produce programs and performances in the 1960s. Nicole's own work has spanned over 20 years in the events, creative, and theater realm, from solo performance, new media production, filmmaking, screenplay writing, and event production. She believes that elevating the culture and helping heal generational trauma through art is part of her legacy. Thank you so much for being here, Nicole.
Thank you for having me, Sophia and Anne.
So to start us off, could you tell us a bit about Balay Kreative, its mission, and its offerings?
Sure. So at Balay Kreative, we believe that the multifaceted nature of Filipino Americans and the arts and culture that we bring to the space, to San Francisco, really cross-pollinates to different audiences. And what we want to do in one of our missions is to push the arts scene and help it thrive, especially in the Soma district. So Balay Kreative is a 3,600 square foot art studio right in the heart of Soma, and it houses an artist residency program, flexible studio spaces for Filipino American artists, a maker's lab with laser cutters, a wood shop, a sewing shop, and also an innovative streaming hub, which you can see behind me, for content creators of podcasts and YouTube videos. And when we aren't hosting artists in our space, we're also hosting different cultural events like chef demos, painting classes, and also retail therapy called Republica.
Thanks so much. And I don't know if the audience knows this, but Balay means home. So Nicole, how does the idea of home, or the place where I grew up, influence and inspire the work at Balay Kreative?
You know, it's funny that the whole theme of this panel and also Peter's work is the place where I grew up, because Balay is a special place in a lot of our hearts. Balay, for those that don't know, is actually Cebuano, Ilocano, and Waray, meaning, like you said, home. And that's actually from my own ancestry. My grandmother's Waray. So historically, for a lot of Filipinos, home is something that has often been taken from us through colonization, through war, gentrification, or even forced migration. And so for many immigrants, home is constantly and continuously explored, expressed, resiliently made, and even fought for. So I believe that for us, reclaiming home is sort of a revolutionary act, especially here in San Francisco with everything that's going on with gentrification and sort of like the arts and culture scene being swept away with the tech scene. So as Filipinos, whenever we're together in community, or Kapwa as we call it, we are home. that being said, Balay Creative Studios is literally the Philippine X house of creatives or home of creatives. It's a safe space to push our culture forward, a safe space for our community to heal through art, creativity, and of course, togetherness. And I think that's togetherness, whether it's in person at Balay Creative or even these virtual spaces like on Zoom.
That's really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And how long have Filipinos called San Francisco their home? And what is the significance of Balay Creative calling SOMA home?
So Filipinos have actually lived in San Francisco for over a century. I think a lot of folks that moved to the Bay Area are unaware of the huge migration of Filipinos that happened in the 1920s to 1940s. There were actually close to 40,000 Filipino males that came to San Francisco in the 1920s. And two of those men were my grandfathers on both sides in 1927. One of them being Canuto Salaver, like you talked about earlier, and he actually owned the very first pool hall and restaurant in Manila town. But because of the gentrification of Manila town in the 1960s and 70s, a lot of the Filipino cultural district was pushed out. So that was like Kearny Street, the financial district. And in order to find a different thriving neighborhood, a lot of them moved to the SOMA area. So SOMA in the 1960s became a hub for Filipino culture, Filipino families. And the South of Market district, even now, is home to so many Filipinos and their loved ones. And of course, all of the nonprofits that are thriving there, like Bernadette Tsai and Dr. Borja, who started the Bayanihan Center, or Bindlesif Studios, that was started in the 1990s and is the only Filipino American theater in the nation. So, you know, as Filipinos start to thrive in SOMA, in 2016, the city of San Francisco actually officially recognized the SOMA district, South of Market, as San Francisco's Filipino Cultural Heritage District under the leadership of the Phil Am Development Foundation. So here at Balay Creative and Kapwa Gardens, our sister nonprofit, we continue this legacy of making SOMA our home and preserving the culture and building community with other partners here in SOMA.
So connecting to that idea of legacy, what was your experience growing up in San Francisco as a Filipino American and a child of artists?
So it was a double-edged sword, right? Because even though my parents, I think I have a picture there, my mother in her samba gear, and she used to dance for Carlos Santana. And my father, who was a painter, and he did murals for Presida Eyes. He was also a musician and a guitarist for many bands growing up. And even my grandfather, the one I talked about earlier, Canuto, he was a drummer for a big band that toured the nation. He's a Filipino drummer back then in the 1940s. And even though art was very connected to my family, I was raised to think that you couldn't really make money doing art, that it was more of a hobby than a career. And so I think being Filipino American in the 80s and 90s, we always had to have sort of the backup plan, right? The degree in the medical fields, or, you know, government, or work for the government, and then do your art when you have time. So it was a unique experience that I was supported in my artistry, but also I had to focus on a real job with health insurance and everything like that. It actually took me a while to move out of San Francisco and take my career to the next level as an artist in New York City. And it was that time in New York, 10 years in New York, that I actually was able to make money as an artist, as an actor, writer, and I thrived in New York. But there was something missing that I felt was needed, and what that is community. And that's why San Francisco is always going to be home for me, and why I decided to work here at Balay, because Balay is all about community and Kapwa, and seeing yourself not only through your art, but through the people that are around you. And I think it's important for us as Filipino Americans not only to create, to express, and to heal, but to create to also uplift and elevate our culture and our people and help others be inspired to do what they love and follow their passion.
And moving forward, how does and will Balay Creative continue to be a home for seasoned and emerging Filipinx artists in the SOMA area, the Bay Area, and beyond?
So our programs and events center, like I said, at the SOMA, creating like this nexus of Filipino diaspora. And Balay Creative and the creatives that are housed in the space are definitely pushing our Filipinx creativity forward. We're, building structures, we're painting murals all over the district. And on top of that, Balay Creative as a nonprofit has invested over $100,000 of our own budget to building programming that reflects our rich culture and our history, re-granting, meaning like giving grants to other artists in SOMA and the Bay Area. And we're proud to announce that we'll be doing that this year in 2022, giving more grants to artists and those who want to build programs for the SOMA district and other Filipino Americans. We're also going to be launching our Creative Growth Masterclass series, which is a professional development series for artists and creatives to really, like I said, develop themselves not only as artists, but as people who are running their own business and to see that they can make money from art. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We can also create opportunities and abundance for ourselves and our communities through our art and our creative work. And lastly, we're going to be launching our podcast this year at our beautiful streaming hub. So we believe that representation matters. And of course, we want to uplift all our Filipino Americans in our community and even outside of our community, pushing forward to outside of the Bay Area and bringing the culture and our arts forward. And if people want to know more about our granting program, our masterclass, they can always sign up for our newsletter through our website or even follow us on social media at Balay Creative.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I personally feel so energized hearing about all that you've been doing at Balay, and I'm looking forward to see what's to come.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophia and Anne.
Okay, so our second panelist is Cristine Blanco. Born and raised in the Bay Area, Cristine Blanco is an interdisciplinary artist who works in painting, sculpture, video, and installation. Her works take environmental injustices, the precarity of resources, and familial story as her starting point. Inspired by her grandmother's home in the Philippines, she explores the impact of rising sea levels and considers how human connectivity and adaptation are essential to recovery and transformation. Cristine is a 2020 MFA Mills College graduate. She exhibited works at Kala Art Institute, Root Division, Berkeley Art Center, and Soma Arts Cultural Center. She has taught sculpture classes at Southern Exposure and Richmond Art Center. Cristine was recently awarded the 2021-2022 Individual Artist Fellowship by the California Arts Council. So as you can see, she has a lot of experience. Thank you so much for joining us, Cristine, and I leave it to you to share more about your art practice.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. So a lot of my work is very much in theme with this panel today, or topic of this panel today. So I wanted to start off by showing work that I did in grad school. And these are two images or video stills from a video installation that I did where I took old photos of my parents and projected them onto myself. And this was me really trying to unpack my own lineage and trying to really kind of collapse this generation between my parents, myself, and also thinking about the future generation. So go ahead and next slide. So fast forward to 2021, and I have found myself back at my parents' home. And this is my most recent work that I did for Balay, and this is at Kapwa Gardens, and I was very much inspired by my parents' garden, as well as other friends and families' gardens in the Filipino community. And so you can toggle between this slide and the next slide, but much of I'm really interested in objects that represent Filipino identity, as well as fruit, vegetables, and flora that are recognizable within the community or back home, as they say. And so I really was interested in taking these objects that hold a lot of significance and creating this still life image and presenting it in the Kapwa Garden space. This work has been especially important to me in creating because I am a new mother, and so it's become a little bit of my identity. And so I created this in my 3rd trimester, and then also postpartum. And so there was a lot of kind of unpacking this new identity for myself while I was creating this. Next slide. So gonna rewind a little bit again, back to my old photos of my parents. So this is my mom in the late 1970s, her early 20s, and this is when she, I think, first migrated to California. And I found this photo and immediately knew what it was. And it's an image of her in a model home. And I knew it because this is something that she and my aunts would do with me and my cousins. And we would tour model homes and kind of take pictures and kind of play pretend and pose in front of the camera. And so this picture really stood out to me because it's just so almost over the top. And I love everything about it. And so I obsessed over it. And next slide, I basically recreated it with paper, this kind of absurdity of it, and then also the flimsiness of this image was very interesting to me. And so go ahead and move on to the next slide. I knew that when I created it, I wanted to have different iterations of it. So I recorded myself previously kind of eating and making a meal in front of it. And then in its 3rd iteration, I wanted to basically destroy it. Yeah, go ahead and play. I'm going to talk over this. The sound isn't necessary. And so I finished this work right before the pandemic hit in January 2020. And this is a video of the work being burned along the California coastline. And in making this, I was thinking about several things, kind of unpacking, you know, climate change and wildfires being very common in the Bay Area. And then also thinking about my own relatives being pushed out of the Bay Area because of high price or high cost of living, and just kind of putting these pieces back together and meditating on it. And so this work is actually 8 minutes long. It's a very, very slow moving video, but in that way, I kind of try and invite the viewer to, you know, sit and slow down and kind of take it all in. Next slide. And so the next section is a series that I like to call Grandma's House. Again, a lot of my work is around the home. And so this is work that I finished in 2021. This is at Mills Art Museum. this was my thesis work, and I'm very proud of it. And it's work that I am continuing to unpack. And basically this work is thinking about my own grandmother's house and archiving it and documenting it in this form of sculpture and installation. And these are images of my grandmother's house in the Philippines from the mid-90s. And so I wanted to include this for reference and understanding what is happening. So you can go on to the next slide after one more. Great. Okay, so that one was from the mid-90s. This is in 2016 when my sister visited, and she showed me, you know, what my grandmother and my grandmother's house in 2016 with the water filling the house. So two things were happening: floods and then rising sea levels. And in interviewing my dad about the house, apparently they were living in this for several years because there wasn't proper drainage. Next slide. And so I found that image very honestly startling, because I have so much memory tied to my grandmother's house in the Philippines. And so I kind of wanted to work with that and document it and share the story through my artwork. And so I also think it's kind of a funny image, the fact that these chairs, these cheap chairs, are holding up the table and functioning in a different way. But also in talking to other people, this is also something very familiar. I know I've had several conversations with people who live in New Orleans and had to do the same thing to save precious furniture. Next slide. And this is my grandmother's house in the present day. I visited in 2019 with my family and my mom. There's a huge reunion. So go ahead, next slide. So I'm sorry, go back one more, apologize. A little bit about this, it's kind of hard to tell, but this house has shrunken. So basically what had happened is because they didn't have proper drainage, they filled in that water with local sand and concrete to be able to just level out the ground. So it's about 3 feet shorter than it previously was. So next slide, thank you. So I wanted to recreate this by kind of working through the same process. And this concrete is basically what they did. They filled in some of the benches so that they wouldn't float away or stay in place. Next slide. So I just wanted to bring this back for reference. You can go forward one more time. So that door that you saw on that previous slide, I like to work with found objects as well. And so this was a door that I found on Craigslist, and I was pretty amazed at how much it felt like my grandmother's entryway. And this is my uncle at the entrance, where you can see how short it is. And I'm not that tall, I'm 5'1", and I myself have to duck when I go through. So next slide. So I cut the bottom part to 3 feet and filled it in with that mixture of sand and concrete. Go ahead to the next slide. And I also wanted to show some process images of how I work. I wanted to recreate this stairway. It's especially important to me because I have memories of my grandfather sitting near that stairway. Next slide. And so I filled it in and kind of wanted to abstract this image and also slice it out of place so that you can really understand this sense of loss. Next slide. And then I wanted to end on this artwork. It's very much influenced by my grandmother's house, but it's kind of also work that I was creating during the pandemic, and it was a very meditative process. So I built hand built each of these bricks from my own backyard and thinking about access to land. And I really wanted to work with my hands and dirt. So I sifted clay out of my backyard and created each brick by hand, and kind of thinking about these archways and entryways to spaces and kind of blocking them. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's really inspiring to see how you translate your personal experiences into your art and address themes like environmental justice and the idea of home. Can you share the importance of working in different medias throughout your process?
Yeah, so it's important. I started off as a painter, and so that's how I usually work through, but I have found that painting doesn't always translate in the way that I want it to, send my message. And I have found that working specifically with materials and kind of asking the question of why do I want to work with certain materials like clay and sand, and I find that it brings me into this headspace that helps me translate the work. And sometimes I don't know what material I'll be working with or what is going to come to fruition. But again, painting is where I start off to create each work.
Thank you. So now for the remaining 15 minutes, for all of us in the audience, feel free to put any questions in the chat. But to get us started, because of the pandemic, many of us have been working within the home, from home. How has this changed or influenced both of you in your art or in your work?
I can go first.
Go for it.
So like I said, originally during the beginning of the pandemic, I was an actor / writer living in New York, on set pretty regularly. And then once the pandemic hit, all the sets and all the studios shut down. Everything basically shut down in New York. So the pandemic sort of gave me the opportunity and the challenge to really transform myself as an artist. And I'd always wanted to write, produce, and direct my own projects. And so I just took all that time and started to write my first screenplay. I shot 3 short films, a music video, and directed someone else's short film as well. My mother's short film, she wrote one too. And so it really allowed me to sort of go out of my comfort zone in ways that I didn't even think possible. So I was able to sort of make lemonade out of lemons, I think.
That's amazing. That sounds like a lot of work that you created. For me, I've really have been limited by space and not having, again, like not having access to facilities. And so painting has been something that I've come back to, which I forgot how much I loved, because before that, again, I was doing a lot of sculpture work. I still do sculpture, and it looks a lot different now. It's much smaller because I don't have a big studio, but now that I'm at Balay, it's, by the way, amazing. And I love this place because it's been really supportive in my transition from being an artist who just graduated. But yeah, I feel like I'm still figuring out where my artwork is, or how my artwork is changing. Also because, again, being a new mom, my time is very limited. And so I'm finding that my work has to be made in quick spurts of moments that I have for myself.
We have a question here. Space problems, you mean as in personal space?
Physical space and not being able to create as as big as I'd like, or what I was used to when I had access to studio space.
Yeah, it's amazing how much access to that can make a difference in people's art practice. And another question is, how has the Bay Area continued to influence your artistry for both of you?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area as well. And so I'm always thinking about it. And like in my previous work that I showed for residential status, thinking about how the Bay Area is changing, and how even my family dynamics changing, and how it's spreading inland to Sacramento. And I haven't had too many family moving outside of the state, but that's something I think about a lot.
I think as a third generation Filipino American, born and raised in the Bay, and also having family, rich family history here in the Bay, I think every project that I do is connected to Bay Area culture in some shape, way, or form. Whether that's like my very first pilot was about Filipino Panays, in very like 90s, early 2000 Bay culture and the urban sort of style and presence that they carry. And even my one woman show was about my grandmother and her descent into Alzheimer's, and how Filipino Americans in the Bay, it's a very unique cultural experience to be Filipino American and from the Bay Area, as opposed to LA, Seattle, or Queens, or New Jersey. And I think so often, especially in the mass media, we never get to see that reflected to us. We always see, like, yes, the Filipino Americans who have immigrated here, who, are caregivers, but we never really see the Filipino American culture that I have grown up with or been exposed to, or even like parts of my family. And so what I love to do as a writer and now director and producer is to reflect that back and sort of inject that in all of my projects, whether it's, a one-woman show, a short film, a full feature film, or even just a short comedy.
You are both women of many, many talents. And I know we've touched on speaking on identity, legacy, home, and we have a question from my mother actually asking asking Cristine, and I know Nicole, you are going to be a mother as well, how your child or children inspire your work.
This is, because I'm a new mom, I just get really excited the fact that I can make art alongside him. But one thing that I have started thinking about is, again, material and what I'm working with, and changing things to be less wasteful, again, in the theme of environmental justice, but also being more aware of if something is toxic. But in terms of like content in my work, I'm still figuring it out. But I have personally, because I'm pumping and stuff, I have been drawing him, and but it's my own, like, for my own personal enjoyment. I'm not sure it's something that I want to like put out in the world, but I can see it changing and influencing work that I'm moving forward. So.
Yeah, so I am in my third trimester. I was just sharing with Anne and Sophie, I'm actually in the hospital right now due to preeclampsia. But I believe, even though he's not earthside yet, he's not born yet, I believe my child is already inspiring me and influencing all of my choices, not just work choices. So for me, this year has really, as soon as I found out I was pregnant, it's really been about legacy for me and what I'm leaving for him as far as even the work I'm doing here at Balay Creative. You know, what can I leave for him and his descendants? What kind of programs can I leave for them? And the same, I think, goes for my art. You know, I've always wanted to write a child's or a children's book, a movie, a TV show with Philippine mythology characters. And so that's something I've always wanted to do, like a graphic novel and eventually a TV show and possibly a 3-part series like Harry Potter or even more. So I've always had these ideas sort of floating in my head. And now that he's about to be born, I feel like they're very close to manifesting in the next like 5 to 10 years with him as my inspiration and my guide to creating these stories for future generations of Filipino Americans.
It's funny, can I add to that? I myself have always been wanting to make a graphic novel. But yeah, all of these like lullabies too, that my parents would share with me, I'm finding myself wanting to preserve those. And I had bought a book that's a Filipino children's book for my sister. And I remember my dad like looking at it and he was just like, oh, they didn't have these like for you guys. And so it really made me think about myself wanting to create a children's book too. And like my work, it's part of archiving and documenting my own personal history, but again, thinking about the next generation and providing something for them that, like, you know, that I didn't grow up with or my parents didn't grow up with. And it feels really exciting to have that agency and power.
Thank you both for sharing that. It sounds amazing. And I think, you know, representation in many forms is super important. And I look forward to maybe a future graphic novel. We have a question from one of our artists at Creativity Explored, JD Green. He asks, for both of you, do you have a favorite new experience doing your art?
I think the most recent experience was directing my mother's short film. She wrote a film about Leonardo da Vinci and his time with his apprentices. And I think casting, producing, and directing that film, and then seeing my mother's joy and excitement as, you know, the final product was shown at a film festival. I think that was one of my favorite experiences, especially as an artist and a daughter.
One thing that I have been really enjoying lately, and this is working with my dad. He's always been inspiring for me because he's always worked with his hands and been really creative. And so when I was pregnant, I needed help and assistance in carrying things. And I found myself having to ask him to, you know, make certain cuts on wood and helping me figure out how to jerry rig something. And fast forward to today, and it's exciting to see him start to create his own artwork again, which I'm trying to encourage. He's getting into woodworking. And so now I'm hoping to do more collaborations with him. I did one 2020, and so that was really fun because I put his name on the list of artists too, and it was really satisfying because I remember having him telling me in middle school, like, I've always wanted to be an artist, but you know, my mom told me not to, and so it's kind of satisfying for me to push him in that way.
So great to hear how intertwined family is within all the themes that we're talking about, and work and art. I think we have time for one more question. Do you feel any kinship with Peter Cordova and his art or experience?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I started reading the comments.
It's okay. Yes, I'll repeat it. Do you feel any kinship with Peter Cordova and his art or experience?
Absolutely. I had the chance to drop in and see it in the physical too last week. And so it made me so happy to see these like family portraits, and also understanding that his family also supports him in creating, and his it's amazing how prolific he is, and it's inspiring to me in wanting to create and really kind of just keep going and not think too much about the work and just make and keep making.
Yeah, I was also very blessed to be able to come to the gallery and see his work in person. And I think the thing that struck me the most was not only the attention to detail, but the love and care that he puts into each and every piece. And it shows. And I love the themes of, like you said, Native Americans and Indigenous peoples, because as a Filipino American, my own decolonization journey started a couple of years ago. And I think it's really important to get back to those roots, whether that's our own, Philippine roots or those of the natives that came before us on this land. And to really honor those things spiritually and also now physically in our art forms. So I completely connected to it on other spiritual levels. And I was really happy that, Anne and Sophia and Creativity Explored invited us both to be part of this panel. And it just felt like everything was in alignment for tonight, actually. So yes, definitely kinship and definitely an inspiration, like Christine said. And I'm so grateful to be here. So thank you again, Anne and Sophia.
Thank you so much. It feels like everything came together so organically and naturally without us even knowing. And I feel really grateful to have had you both speak with us and get to know your stories a little bit more. And I look forward to seeing what you both do next.
Yeah, very inspiring. I'll just mimic that. Thank you so much for joining us. And I have a feeling this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship and expanding our community. And speaking on behalf of Peter, I know he appreciated being included and having his exhibition kind of be the impetus for this new relationship. So thank you all. And thanks everyone for participating. We are recording this, so we will be releasing this presentation later on YouTube, as well as an expanded walkthrough of Peter's show. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much.